The unexpected signal. Commander Sarah Velasquez leaned back in her captain's chair, the soft hum of the UE Prometheus's engines vibrating through the metal floor. It was late, well past the usual shift change, and the ship was gliding through the cold expanse of space on autopilot. As she stared out into the infinite black, her thoughts drifted like the stars, distant, unreachable, and endless. Then the calm was shattered. A high-pitched chime rang out, breaking the silence like a sudden bolt of lightning. Her eyes snapped to the console before her, where a flashing red alert lit up the otherwise dimly lit bridge. A transmission. "Are we picking up some kind of interference?" she asked, glancing over at Lieutenant Harlan, her communications officer. His fingers danced over the controls, already analyzing the data stream. "No, Commander," he said, his voice tight with uncertainty. "This is a message, a distress signal." Sarah's stomach tightened. Distress signals were common, but the source, always a question mark. And this one, it didn't look like anything she had encountered before. The readout showed a strange, unfamiliar frequency. It wasn't a signal from any known civilization, and it was coming from deep within the Keldar Nebula, a place humanity had barely begun to explore. "Can you identify the origin?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. She couldn't afford to show any sign of hesitation. A commander had to be certain, no matter what. Harlan's face scrunched in disbelief as he continued to analyze the signal. "This doesn't make sense, Commander. The origin. It's coming from the Xylaxian expanse." The Xylaxians. Sarah's voice barely whispered the name. The Xylaxians were legends in the galaxy, beings of incomparable technological mastery and cold, impenetrable pride. Humanity had encountered them 5 years ago, and their reaction had been swift and unyielding. "We will speak when you have earned our time," they had said, dismissing Earth like an irrelevant child. The Xylaxians were ancient, their empire stretching across hundreds of star systems, but they had shown no interest in cooperation or diplomacy. Their message to Earth had been clear: return when you have something worthy to offer. And now, they were sending a distress signal. It made no sense. "Are you sure it's from them?" Sarah asked, leaning forward. Harlan nodded slowly. "The signal's too precise to be a mistake. It's encrypted in Xylaxian code. No doubt about it." Sarah's mind raced. The Xylaxians, with their perfectionist tendencies and near-godlike technology, had no reason to be in distress. Their quantum systems were nearly infallible. Their ships never broke down. Their civilization had, for centuries, been the pinnacle of order in the galaxy. They didn't ask for help. Ever. She tapped her communicator. "Get me a full analysis on this signal. I want to know exactly what's happening now." A moment passed before the data began to flood the screen. The telemetry came through, complex, overwhelming data that would normally be the domain of quantum engineers and astrophysicists. Sarah skimmed the lines quickly, her mind working fast. And then she saw it. "Captain, you need to see this," Harlan said, his voice laced with concern. Sarah stood and walked to his station. On the display, a cascade of failing systems began to unfold in real time. The Xylaxians' quantum core, a massive planet-sized engine that powered their entire civilization, was in critical failure. Their self-regulating AI system, which had always kept things in perfect balance, was no longer working. The core was rapidly destabilizing. If it wasn't fixed, the entire Xylaxian central colony would implode within 72 hours, taking millions of lives with it. Sarah's blood ran cold. This is a disaster," she muttered. The Xylaxians had never allowed such an event to even be possible. Their eye was programmed to predict and correct any instability before it could even begin. How could something like this happen? "Captain, it gets worse," Harlan continued. "The core isn't just malfunctioning. It's in a failure cascade. A total collapse is imminent unless someone intervenes." Her heart sank. The Xylaxians had prided themselves on their invulnerability. And now, they were on the brink of annihilation. Sarah thought back to the first encounter with the Xylaxians. Their condescending attitude, their aloofness, it had all been so infuriating. Humanity, always the underdog, had never been given a chance to prove itself. But now their entire way of life was at risk, and Earth was in a position to help. But would they? Sarah took a deep breath and steadied herself. The answer was simple. Of course, Earth would help. The question was, could they? Could humanity, a species still learning the delicate intricacies of quantum engineering, actually save the Xylaxians? She didn't have the answers yet, but she knew one thing for sure. If there was any hope, it rested with the ingenuity and perseverance of humanity. "Lieutenant," she said firmly, her voice taking on a new edge, "get me Dr. Marcus Torres in quantum engineering immediately. We're going to need every mind we have on this. The Xylaxians might think they don't need us, but we're going to show them just how wrong they are." The mission was clear. In the next 72 hours, Commander Sarah Velasquez and her crew would face the ultimate test. Not just a race against time, but a battle for humanity's place in the galaxy. Would Earth's best and brightest be able to fix the impossible? Or would they too fall victim to the arrogance of those who believed they were above failure? Sarah didn't know, but she was determined to find out. The journey begins. The UE Prometheus hummed through the vastness of space, its sleek, silver frame cutting through the darkness like a blade. As Commander Sarah Velasquez paced the command deck, the urgency of the situation began to settle in, like the weight of 1,000 suns pressing down on her shoulders. There was no turning back now. Earth had just been handed a monumental opportunity to prove its worth to the Xylaxians. But as much as she believed in the strength of humanity, Sarah knew the odds were stacked against them. "Dr. Torres is en route, Commander," Lieutenant Harlan reported, his voice tinged with nervous anticipation. "He's bringing his team with him. They're preparing a full diagnostic on the quantum core and will be ready to assist as soon as we arrive." "Good," Sarah nodded, grateful for the help but knowing it wouldn't be enough. The Xylaxian core was beyond even the most advanced Earth systems. Its complexity was almost unfathomable. They were walking into the unknown, and every minute counted. The ship's AI, Echo, pinged the bridge with an update on their trajectory. "Prometheus will reach the Xylaxian expanse in 4 hours, Commander. All systems are operating at full capacity." "Thank you, Echo," Sarah said, though her mind was elsewhere. The Xylaxians had designed their quantum core using principles of physics and mathematics that Earth had barely begun to grasp. To them, failure was an anomaly. To humanity, failure was something they learned to embrace and overcome. Her fingers drummed against the console. There was a certain beauty in failure. In humanity's history, failure was always the first step toward greatness. Each mistake made, each setback, became a lesson that pushed Earth forward, ever resilient, ever growing. It was this spirit, the ability to rise, to adapt, to learn, that separated humanity from the cold, unyielding perfectionism of the Xylaxians. "Commander," Lieutenant Martin's voice interrupted her thoughts. "I've been scanning the signal we received earlier. There's something strange about it." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "The signal itself. It's not just a cry for help. There's something more encoded within it. It's almost like a test. A challenge," Martin said, tapping a few keys to bring up the data. "The distress message contains a series of cryptic instructions. If we decode them, it might give us an edge when we reach the colony." A challenge. The Xylaxians were known for their intellect, but they were also known for their pride. The idea that they might be testing humanity, was that arrogance or something else entirely? Sarah studied the holographic readout that now filled the bridge. The instructions were complicated, a mix of mathematical formulas and ancient symbols. To the untrained eye, they looked like nonsense. But to someone with the right knowledge, someone like Dr. Marcus Torres, they could hold the key to saving the Xylaxians. "This could be our ticket," Sarah said, her voice filled with resolve. Prepare to transmit this to Dr. Torres. If there's a way to make sense of these instructions, he's the one who can do it." A sudden shudder ran through the ship, a jolt that rattled the crew's nerves. "What was that?" Harlan asked, his eyes wide with concern. Echo's calm voice answered, "The Prometheus has entered the outer boundary of the Xylaxian expanse. Gravitational forces are stronger than anticipated. No immediate danger, but adjustments to course are advised." Sarah's jaw tightened. The Xylaxian expanse was not a place where Earth ships typically ventured. It was known for its erratic gravitational anomalies, a result of the powerful cosmic forces at play near the Xylaxian homeworld. Navigating through it would be a delicate operation, and the stakes couldn't be higher. "Get us to the Xylaxian central colony as fast as possible, Echo, but be careful. We don't want to end up as another failed mission in their history books," Sarah ordered. Echo's response was immediate. "Understood, Commander. Adjusting trajectory now." The ship began to veer sharply, aligning itself with a safer route. Sarah could feel the pull of gravity increase, testing the integrity of the ship's structure. She gripped the armrests of her chair, her knuckles white. This was only the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead. 4 hours. That's all the time they had. "Lieutenant Martin," Sarah said, turning back toward him, "I want you to keep an eye on the telemetry. Anything out of the ordinary, I need to know immediately." "Understood, Commander," Martin replied, his fingers flying over the controls. "We're in uncharted territory, but I'll make sure we're ready for anything." As the ship continued its journey toward the Xylaxian colony, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what awaited them. Would the Xylaxians view Earth's intervention as an act of charity or as an imposition? Would they even accept the help? Or would humanity's attempt to rescue them be seen as an act of arrogance, one that would turn the Xylaxians against them forever? "Sarah," a familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Dr. Marcus Torres, the head of Earth's Quantum Engineering Division. He appeared on the holographic screen, his face drawn but determined. "I've been reviewing the data you sent. I think I have an idea of what we're up against." "Tell me," Sarah urged. Torres adjusted his glasses, his brow furrowed with concentration. "The Xylaxian quantum core isn't just failing. It's in a kind of quantum paradox. It's a collapsing feedback loop that their AI can't correct because it was designed under the assumption that nothing could go wrong. Our best bet is to introduce controlled instability into their system, something we've used before on Earth during the Shanghai incident." The Shanghai incident, the failure of one of Earth's first major quantum cores 15 years ago, had almost cost them everything. But it had also taught them something vital. Sometimes, the only way to fix an impossible problem was to embrace imperfection and chaos. Sarah nodded, understanding. "So we give them a dose of human ingenuity. A little bit of chaos in the right places to break the paradox." "Exactly," Torres replied. "We have the knowledge, but we need to act quickly. The Xylaxians might resist at first, but we'll have to show them that sometimes a little human imperfection is the best solution to a perfect system gone wrong." The next few hours would be a race against time. Sarah had no illusions about the difficulty of the task ahead. But as she looked out at the stars ahead of them, her resolve hardened. This wasn't just about saving the Xylaxians. This was about showing the galaxy that humanity's strength didn't lie in perfection. It lay in resilience, adaptability, and the relentless pursuit of solutions, no matter the odds. "Let's bring them a lesson they won't forget," Sarah said, her voice filled with determination. And with that, the UE Prometheus surged forward into the heart of the Xylaxian expanse, ready to face the impossible. The Xylaxian dilemma. The Prometheus descended into the heart of the Xylaxian expanse, the ship's hull groaning under the strain of the gravitational forces pulling it through the unknown. Commander Sarah Velasquez stood at the front of the bridge, her eyes fixed on the holographic map of the Xylaxian central colony, now only a few hours away. The once pristine image of the colony was now distorted by layers of static and interference. The colony was a vast, sprawling city floating in the void, a marvel of alien engineering. But Sarah's mind was focused elsewhere. The real battle wasn't with the gravitational anomalies or the vast distance they had traveled. It was with time. Dr. Marcus Torres had already initiated contact with the Xylaxian colony's emergency AI, but the response had been far from reassuring. The message had been curt, almost dismissive, as though the Xylaxians couldn't believe that humans would dare interfere in their perfectly structured systems. "We're entering their outer atmosphere." Harlan's voice broke through Sarah's thoughts, his hand steady at the controls. "I'm adjusting our course to avoid detection. If they don't want us here, we'll have to work quietly." "Good," Sarah replied, her eyes narrowing as the station ahead grew clearer. "We don't need to announce our presence just yet. We need to fix the core first. The rest can wait." The ship glided closer to the center of the colony. Sarah could see massive quantum pylons stretching from the surface of the planet, glowing faintly with energy. These pylons were the heart of Xylaxian civilization, feeding power into every corner of their world. But now they flickered, as if struggling to maintain the delicate balance they had once commanded effortlessly. "We've arrived at the quantum station," Harlan announced. The Prometheus hovered just outside the colony's main docking bay, a sprawling structure that looked like a fusion of organic and mechanical design. It was magnificent, but the beauty of the colony was tainted by the urgent reality that lay ahead. Sarah glanced at Dr. Torres, who had joined her on the bridge, a look of intense concentration on his face as he examined the data streaming in from the Xylaxian core. His usual confidence was tinged with unease. "Marcus, what are we up against?" Sarah asked. Dr. Torres looked up, meeting her gaze. "The Xylaxians don't just rely on their quantum core for energy. They've designed it to be the very backbone of their society. The core stabilizes their economy, their defense systems, even their communication networks. Everything depends on it. If it fails completely, it's not just the colony that will collapse, it's their entire civilization." Sarah's heart tightened. The stakes couldn't be higher. But the more she learned about the Xylaxian system, the more complex it seemed. The core wasn't just a power source. It was an integrated entity, operating on a level of quantum processing so advanced that even the brightest human minds were still struggling to comprehend it fully. "The feedback loop Dr. Torres mentioned earlier, it's not just malfunctioning," Sarah said, glancing back at the telemetry on the bridge's main screen. "It's like the core is rejecting itself. If we try to force it back into alignment, we'll just make things worse." Torres nodded grimly. "Exactly. Their quantum AI can't adapt to this kind of instability. It was designed to predict and correct failures, but not to handle something as chaotic as this. The only thing that can fix it is an external intervention. Something human. Something flexible. We're not going to do this the Xylaxian way," Sarah said, a flicker of determination in her voice. "We're going to teach them that sometimes you can't control everything. Sometimes you need to embrace imperfection to solve a problem." Torres smiled, a rare spark of hope in his tired eyes. "I knew you'd get it." But just as Sarah was about to give the order to initiate their plan, a new alarm blared on the bridge, cutting through the air like a warning shot. "What is it?" Sarah demanded. Harlan's fingers flew across the controls. "We've been detected, Commander. They've locked onto us with their sensors. We're not going to get much further without a fight." Sarah cursed under her breath. The Xylaxians were notorious for their disdain toward outsiders, especially humans. She had known this was a possibility, but she hadn't expected it to happen so soon. "Can we disable their sensors?" she asked, her mind racing through possible solutions. "We can try," Harlan replied. "But their technology is advanced. I might be able to create a temporary blind spot in their system, enough for us to get inside and reach the core. But I need time." "How much time?" 5 minutes at best, Harlan said, his brow furrowed in concentration. "After that, they'll track our every move." Sarah nodded decisively. "That's all we need." She turned to Dr. Torres. who had already begun analyzing the quantum core's telemetry in greater detail. "Marcus, you and your team need to prepare for a full shutdown sequence. When we get inside, we'll have to work fast. There's no room for mistakes." Torres gave her a firm nod. "We're ready." "Lieutenant Martin," Sarah called, turning to her communications officer. "Contact Earth Central. Tell them we may need backup if things go sideways." "Aye, Commander," Martin responded, his face pale. He sent the message. Though everyone on the bridge knew the truth, backup was unlikely to arrive in time. For a moment, Sarah allowed herself a deep breath. She had made her decision. Earth was going to do what no one had ever done before: fix a system so perfect it couldn't even fail. But first, they had to survive the Xylaxians' wrath. The next 5 minutes would decide everything. As Harlan worked quickly to scramble their signature, Sarah turned to face the crew, her voice steady, but filled with the weight of the moment. "Once we're in, there's no turning back. We are not just saving the colony. We are showing the galaxy that humanity's greatest strength isn't in perfection, but in our willingness to try. No matter the odds. We'll fix this, or we'll die trying." Her words hung in the air, heavy with truth. The crew was ready. Humanity was ready. The Prometheus slid through the atmosphere of the Xylaxian colony, its sensors scrambled and shields engaged. The fight had only just begun. Breaking through, the Prometheus shuddered violently as it entered the Xylaxian colony's outer atmosphere. Gravity waves surged through the hull, testing its integrity like a storm battering an ancient fortress. Commander Sarah Velasquez held her breath, gripping the edge of the console as she stared out into the flickering lights of the approaching colony. Their window for success was closing fast, and every second felt like an eternity. The Xylaxians might have superior technology, but humans had something they could never replicate: raw, unrelenting determination. "Status." Sarah's voice was sharp, cutting through the tension that filled the bridge. "Shields holding," Harlan replied, his hands a blur over the controls. "We're flying blind, but the temporary sensor jam is working. They won't be able to track our movements for another 3 minutes." "That's all we need," Sarah said, her gaze locked on the chaotic expanse outside the ship's viewport. "Harlan, get us to the core's location. We'll need to move quickly once we land." The ship's engines hummed louder as they descended, pushing past a labyrinth of twisting quantum pylons that loomed ominously in the dark sky like twisted spires of a broken world. The colony's architecture was both magnificent and intimidating, alien designs that defied human comprehension. The quantum core, the heart of it all, lay at the center of this sprawling city of light and shadow. To reach it, they would need to break through layers of defensive systems designed to protect it. "Commander," Lieutenant Martin interrupted, his voice tense. "The Xylaxian fleet has deployed drones. They're heading toward us. They're not armed, but they'll swarm our position if they get too close." "Drones?" Sarah's mind raced. "Why aren't they attacking us directly? Are they just scouting?" "It looks like it," Martin said, eyes glued to his console. "They got a lock on our ship's frequency. It's like they're trying to probe us, see what we're up to. They're giving us a warning." "A warning," Sarah repeated with a wry smile. "How considerate." "Commander, incoming fire," Harlan shouted, his hands snapping to the controls. "They're charging up their defense systems. I can't keep dodging them forever." "Get us to the landing bay now," Sarah ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We'll handle the drones on the ground." There was no time to play it safe. The drones would either overwhelm them or provide the perfect distraction. Either way, they had to act fast. The ship jolted as a wave of energy blasts grazed the hull. The shields flared brightly, absorbing the impact with a violent tremor. Sarah's knuckles turned white as she watched the main console flicker, but Harlan's steady hands kept them on course. "Hold on," Harlan grunted, pulling the ship into a steep dive. The Prometheus weaved between the pylons, narrowly avoiding a barrage of laser blasts from the drones. The colony's towering spires seemed to grow closer with every heartbeat, like the walls of a collapsing prison. The ship's landing bay came into view, a vast open space that looked deceptively calm despite the chaos outside. Sarah's heart raced as they made their final descent. There was no margin for error. Too slow, and they'd be caught in the drone's web of fire. Too fast, and they risked crashing into the heart of the city. Now, Sarah barked. With a jolt, the ship landed on the cold, metallic surface of the Xylaxian colony. The docking bay doors slammed shut behind them, sealing them off from the swarm of drones that now circled the Prometheus, their energy pulses striking the ship's hull harmlessly. "We're on the ground," Harlan said, exhaling deeply. "For now. We've got 30 minutes before those drones figure out what we're doing," Sarah replied, unbuckling her seatbelt. "Let's move." With practiced efficiency, the crew quickly gathered their gear. Dr. Marcus Torres led his team of quantum engineers down the ramp first. Their faces were a mixture of resolve and concern, knowing they were about to face something humanity had never encountered before. The core was unlike anything Earth had ever built, and the Xylaxians had kept their most advanced systems shrouded in secrecy. Sarah's eyes swept across the colony's surroundings as she stepped out into the open. The landscape was alien, both eerie and beautiful, bathed in the strange glow of the quantum pylons. The architecture was fluid, almost alive. Each structure was seamlessly integrated into the environment, as though the buildings themselves were growing from the ground. "Let's keep moving," Sarah urged. "We don't have much time." The team moved swiftly through the streets, passing by towering Xylaxian statues that seemed to watch them with disinterested eyes. The air was thick with tension, each step carrying them closer to the core and closer to the moment where failure could mean extinction for the Xylaxians and possibly for humanity as well. As they reached the entrance to the quantum station, they encountered their first real obstacle. A pair of Xylaxian sentinels stood guard at the entrance, towering figures encased in shimmering exoskeletal armor, their eyes glowing an ominous red. They were armed with energy rifles that hummed with dangerous power. Without hesitation, Sarah raised her hand, signaling for the team to halt. The sentinels' eyes flicked toward them, their sensors scanning the group with precise calculations. "They know we're here," Torres muttered. "If we don't neutralize them, they'll raise an alarm." Sarah assessed the situation quickly. The Xylaxians might be technologically advanced, but they were still bound by their systems that couldn't anticipate human unpredictability. "We won't fight them head-on," Sarah said, her voice calm but sharp. "Lieutenant Martin, you're up. Disrupt their communication network, make it look like we're part of their security protocol." "Can you do it?" Martin's fingers moved rapidly across his console. "I can try. Give me a few seconds." A tense silence filled the air. Every second counted. "Done," Martin said triumphantly, looking up. "Their comms are scrambled. They think we're an internal team." The Sentinels' rigid stances softened. Their systems, unable to detect any anomaly, turned their attention elsewhere, assuming the human team was authorized. "Now's our chance," Sarah whispered, nodding toward the entrance. "Let's go." With swift, calculated movements, the team made their way past the Sentinels, entering the quantum station. The doors shut behind them with a soft hiss, sealing them off from the outside world. Inside, the air was sterile and cold, humming with the energy of the core. They had made it inside, but the hardest part was still ahead. The core was just a few levels down, and it was surrounded by layers of security protocols and Xylaxian defense systems designed to protect it from even the most sophisticated intrusions. Sarah's pulse quickened as they descended into the depths of the station. The walls around them seemed to pulse with the energy of the quantum core, its hum reverberating through the very structure of the building. They were getting closer, and with each step, the stakes grew higher. "Stay sharp," Sarah whispered, eyes scanning the darkness. "We're about to face the heart of their civilization. Let's show them what humanity is really capable of." They reached the final level, the air thick with anticipation. The quantum core loomed ahead, a towering structure that seemed to defy the laws of physics itself. The time had come. Into the heart of the core. The quantum core stood before them, a towering, pulsing behemoth of light and energy that seemed to stretch endlessly into the depths of the Xylaxian station. Its intricate framework hummed with a low, vibrating pulse, as though it were alive, breathing, expanding, contracting. The walls around it were lined with flickering holographic panels displaying streams of incomprehensible data. Sarah Velasquez could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. They were at the heart of a civilization that had perfected the art of control. And now, it was her team's job to unravel that perfection. "Stay close," Sarah whispered, her voice steady, but filled with purpose. "We can't afford any missteps from here on out." The corridors around them were empty, eerily silent, the only sound being the hum of the core reverberating through the metallic structure. As they moved closer, the temperature dropped, the air growing heavier with each step. It felt as if they were walking into the very soul of Xylaxian civilization, where every decision, every failure, every success had been dictated by the quantum power that now teetered on the brink of collapse. "Any sign of other sentinels?" Sarah asked, turning to Lieutenant Martin, who was scanning the perimeter with his handheld device. "Nothing," Martin replied, his brow furrowing. "But I don't trust it. They're hiding something. This level is too quiet." "Focus," Sarah said, her voice firm. "We've come this far, and we're not turning back. Get ready for anything." They reached the central chamber. The core, suspended in midair, was a massive spherical object, radiating energy with a brilliance that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. It was as though the core had become its own star, burning with a power that was far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. Dr. Marcus Torres stepped forward, his face a mixture of wonder and concern. "This is beyond anything I imagined," he murmured, eyes wide as he took in the quantum core's complexity. "I've read the data, but seeing it in person is—" "Focus, Marcus," Sarah interrupted, snapping him out of his reverie. "We don't have time to admire the architecture. We need a solution, now." Torres nodded, his expression hardening. "Right. We'll need to bypass the core's internal algorithms to access the main stabilization systems. The problem is, it's not just the core itself. This entire station is linked to it. Every attempt to rewire the core could trigger a cascade effect across the entire system. If we make a mistake—" "We don't have the luxury of mistakes," Sarah finished, her gaze locked onto the core. "We either fix it, or we watch everything burn." They set to work immediately. Torres and his team of engineers moved to the far side of the chamber, accessing the interface ports embedded into the walls. Each one was a gateway to another part of the quantum network that fed into the core. But as Sarah watched them work, she noticed something strange. The further they delved into the system, the more the core seemed to react. The pulses of light grew brighter, the hum deeper and more rhythmic. "It's responding to us," Torres muttered, stepping back as he connected a cable to the core's interface. "But it's not just the system that's alive. It feels like it's aware, almost like it's thinking." "Could be the quantum eye," Sarah said, though she wasn't convinced. The Xylaxians were known for their advanced technology, but this felt different. "Is there a way to override it?" "Not easily," Torres replied, his fingers flying over the console. "The AI has been designed to learn and adapt faster than any human system. It's not just trying to stabilize itself, it's trying to keep us out. I can feel it." The team worked in tense silence, knowing that every second brought them closer to a potential collapse. Sarah's mind raced. If the quantum core's failure cascaded the way Torres feared, the damage wouldn't just be limited to this station. It could trigger a chain reaction that would destabilize the entire Xylaxian colony and possibly ripple outward into their entire network of intergalactic power grids. But something was gnawing at her, something that didn't sit right. As she scanned the room, her eyes locked onto the central hub of the core. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "Something's wrong," she muttered under her breath. "Commander," Martin asked, stepping closer. "I feel like we're not alone," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Keep an eye out." Just as she finished speaking, the entire room flickered. The bright lights of the core blinked once, then twice, before plunging the chamber into an ominous half-light. The pulse of energy fluctuated, a deep, resonant sound filling the room like the beat of a distant drum. And then, with a loud crack, the chamber doors slammed shut, sealing them in. "What the hell?" Harlan's voice cut through the darkness. "The door's locked. They've sealed us in." "Get back to the interface," Sarah snapped, her instincts kicking in. "Now." The engineers quickly scrambled back to the consoles. But as they did, the core's energy began to spike. The entire room shook violently, the walls vibrating with increasing intensity. Torrid's face was pale as he frantically typed commands into the system, but the results were immediate and unsettling. "It's fighting us," Torrid said, his voice tight with fear. "It's trying to prevent the reset." "Can you override it?" Sarah demanded. "I don't know," Torrid shouted, his hands trembling over the controls. "It's unlike anything we've seen before. The quantum algorithms are rewriting themselves. It's like the core has learned to fight back." A loud mechanical whirring noise echoed throughout the room, followed by the sudden activation of a series of defense turrets embedded in the walls. They began to target the engineers, their red laser sights locking onto each of them in turn. "Move," Sarah ordered, pulling her sidearm as she dove for cover behind one of the nearby consoles. "We need to stop the core from becoming active." The room erupted into chaos. The engineers scrambled to protect themselves as Sarah and Martin laid down covering fire, trying to disable the turrets that were rapidly converging on their position. Harlan rushed to another terminal, his fingers flying over the holographic controls in a desperate bid to shut down the turrets. "Commander," Harlan shouted, his voice panicked. "I can't turn them off. They're linked to the core's self-preservation systems. We're fighting against the very thing we're trying to fix." The room filled with the hum of energy blasts as the turrets fired, narrowly missing Sarah as she ducked behind a metal pillar. Her heart pounded in her chest, and her mind raced through every possible solution. They couldn't fail now, not when they were so close. "Torres," Sarah called out over the din. "Can we isolate the turrets from the core systems? If we can stop them from drawing power, we might have a chance." Torres looked up from his console, his face strained with concentration. "I can try, but I'll need a minute to reroute the power systems. Can you hold off for that long?" Sarah glanced at the turrets, her eyes narrowing with resolve. "We don't have a minute. We've got 30 seconds before this entire station goes up in flames. Make it happen." As the turrets fired again, Sarah's team ducked and returned fire, their backs pressed against the walls. Time was running out, and the Xylaxian core was no longer just an object of power. It had become a ticking bomb, waiting for the slightest mistake. Would they find a way to survive this deadly game of technology against humanity? Or would the perfect design of the Xylaxian civilization prove to be its undoing? It was all down to the final moments.